So unless you've been living under a rock, you might have noticed that Delta Emulator is now fully available on iOS, which allows you to play your favorite retro games from consoles like Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, N64, and to have it all in the palm of your hands on your iPhone. Now, unless you're in the EU, it is easily available in the App Store, so if you're in the US, the UK, Australia, Africa, you can just go into your App Store, download Delta Emulator, and you'll be good to go. If you're in the EU, because of the EU regulation, you do need to go through the Alt Store, and it involves side loading. Has a couple other steps involved, but it's still relatively easy to get installed, but it does cost you, I believe, 1.5 euros. But once it is installed, you'll be good to go to play those same retro games on your iPhone. Now, we do have a full video explaining how to install it, how to use it, how to get your ROMs and use your ROMs, and I'll link those videos down below. But what I want to do in this video is talk about my favorite accessories that coincide with Delta Emulator, because we now have full retro game consoles in your pocket, and unless you're playing a turn-by-turn RPG game, you might be better off using something like a physical controller to play these games. So without further ado, let's talk about my favorite accessories for Delta Emulator to really enhance your emulation capabilities and experience. But I will say, straight out of the box in terms of the software, it's still very easy to use. These accessories just kind of help you amplify just that much more. But let's get into it. So out of the box, Delta Emulator does support up to 6 different consoles, and it goes to SNES, the NES, you have Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and then finally N64. And each one of these consoles have their varying degrees of difficulty in terms of being able to actually play them with virtual buttons. For instance, on the Game Boy Color and maybe Game Boy Advance side, if you're playing like a Pokemon game or a turn-based RPG where you don't really need a joystick or anything like that, then it's going to be very easy to use the actual software controls on the iPhone itself because they're very easy to use. You get some great tactile feedback with the haptic buttons, which is absolutely amazing, so it's very easy to play those games. But then the moment you go to maybe the N64 console where there is a joystick and you do want to have maybe more precise movements like something in Pokemon Stadium or maybe Super Mario or something like that, then the latency starts to kick in a little bit and the virtual buttons aren't as tactile and they don't really give you that one-to-one experience. So I do want to recommend a couple of accessories that go alongside the Delta Emulator because it makes it extremely easy to use things like game controllers. So with that being said, the first thing I'm going to recommend is going to be an Xbox controller or an MFi controller. The amazing thing about the Delta Emulator is that it does support up to 4 different controllers at one time, so you can technically play against other people on your iPhone or your iPad, and stay tuned for a video on gaming on the iPad that's going to be very epic. It's going to come very soon. But you can actually just Bluetooth connect your, let's say, Xbox controller, your PlayStation controller, even your Switch controller Joy-Cons to actually be able to play it virtually on the actual system itself. And the Delta Emulator will smartly adapt to that, so the second it senses that you have an external controller, it'll then remove all the virtual controller buttons on the screen itself, giving you this perfect canvas to then play on your iPhone. So you're then able to play those games like I mentioned earlier, like let's say something like Pokemon Stadium or Super Mario, and then you can play it on your iPhone itself with the actual game controller so you don't have any latency. And there's also other controllers that physically connect to the iPhone via USB-C or via Lightning that give you even more feedback in terms of having less latency because you're not relying on a Bluetooth connection, and I'll link some of those down below. My favorite ones are probably the Backbone one, which attaches via USB-C, but it does get a little bit big to carry, so what I like to carry around mostly is usually my Xbox controller or an MFi controller that kind of mimics what an Xbox controller is. So if you really think about it, you now have a full retro game console in your pocket at all times whenever you want to use it. And one thing that I will say about the Delta Emulator is that it does kind of take a hit on your battery life because you're constantly playing these games, you're constantly attacking the haptic feedback, especially if you're jamming a button over and over again, which is something that I used to do way back in the day when playing something like Pokemon or something on the Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance, and those habits kind of have ported over to this virtual kind of situation on the actual gamepad itself, so I'm constantly tapping the A button or the B button to get something done, which does hit the haptic engine a lot, which does reduce battery life. So I'm going to recommend a few different products that kind of solve 2 problems for me. First is going to be the battery life situation. So first, this is a product by a company called Alumnu, and this is just a MagSafe battery pack with 3,500 milliamp hours, which does give you about another 70 to 80% charge on something like the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It attaches via the MagSafe magnets on the rear, and what I like about this is that it is multifunctional in terms of having a kickstand as well, which is perfect for this setup. So imagine yourself on a train for about an hour, or maybe you're on a plane itself with a little tray table and you want to be able to play your games. What I like about this is that it does give you not only more battery, but also a kickstand to prop your phone up, so then you can connect your Bluetooth controller with this MagSafe battery pack and the kickstand, and then you're gaming on your iPhone playing a Nintendo 64 game or an NES game, and you'll be very happy and good to go. But if you don't want the extra bulk of something like a battery pack, or you're already wired in, or you're not worried about battery, then I do recommend getting a case by a company maybe like Casekoo or Zeera, which has a built-in kickstand, and I'll recommend some down below as well for you guys to check out. And it's very self-explanatory. They just put a kickstand on the case itself. So the case obviously protects the iPhone, but also is multifunctional because it not only has a MagSafe magnet on the rear, but that MagSafe magnet also acts as a kickstand, which gives you the same effect as that aluminum MagSafe battery, just without the battery aspect, of course. Another thing to bring on the go with you is obviously a pair of AirPods or a pair of Bluetooth headphones to really get that immersive experience when you are playing those retro games. Like imagine listening to the Pokemon Yellow soundtrack with your AirPods Pro with noise cancellation on. It's kind of this weird juxtaposition where you're in 2024 playing a game from 1998 and kind of bringing you all the way back to how it used to be. And it's just an amazing experience overall. But some Bluetooth headphones when you're on the go will really kind of help solidify that experience when you are having that game console or that retro game console on the go in that experience overall. So that's your on-the-go solution, right? You have your iPhone, you have your battery pack, you have your controller, you kind of have this now little retro-style game console that you can bring anywhere with you and have a great experience. But now, what if you want to play with those 4 other people, because it does support up to 4 different controllers, and you want to play it on a much larger screen because obviously the iPhone 15 Pro Max, even when it's 6.7-inch display, is still way too small to be playing with multiple people at the same time. And again, Delta Emulator has thought about it all in terms of the functionality and what different situations you're going to want to be using this in. So the first thing is that it supports AirPlay, which is absolutely amazing, and it recognizes when you are using AirPlay. So what I'm going to recommend here is for you to get an Apple TV or Apple TV 4K, or a TV that just supports AirPlay to begin with. So I do have an Apple TV 4K. In order to kind of get this done, all you have to do is AirPlay your actual iPhone screen onto whatever display is connected to the Apple TV, and then you open up Delta Emulator, and then voila, you have your game console on whatever inch screen that you're using, whether it is a 30-inch screen or like the projector that I have right here, which is 100 inches. You're able to then play those retro games in full quality from the Delta Emulator with little to no latency whatsoever. And then again, as I mentioned, it does support up to those 4 different controllers. So imagine playing something like Mario Party or Super Smash Bros. On the N64 with your friends as if you guys were maybe 5, 7, 8 years old back in the day, because that's what we used to do. We used to have all 4 of our friends bring our controllers, our N64 controllers over, and then we would just be playing something like Mario Party all day long because that's how we would pass the time. It was our virtual board game back in the day. And now it's brought back completely with the iPhone because again, it is a game console you can just throw on via AirPlay as long as you have a good internet connection. And as I mentioned, it will work with the Apple TV 4K, or anything that you can physically AirPlay to, and it works absolutely amazing, which is awesome to see. Now, if you don't have an Apple TV or you don't want to spend the money on an Apple TV, especially the 4K one, because it's $150, maybe $200, and it's not really worth it for you, then you can just physically hardwire your iPhone in to any display that you want. So now with iPhones having USB-C, all you need is a USBC hub, or if you still have the older iPhones with a lightning cable, just get a lightning to HDMI adapter, and then you're able to plug in physically to a display, and then voila, it's the same exact effect in terms of being able to play on a much larger screen and play those retro games with others wirelessly with wireless controllers, which again is unbelievable in a completely free emulator that's now fully available on the App Store. And I never thought I'd see the day because Delta Emulator has been around for 5, 6, 7 years in the jailbreak world and then the sideloading world, but now that it's over on the iOS, on the App Store side, it just really opens up the door for so many more people to see. And you can see in the App Store that it is the #1 rated application by far, and it's topping every single chart, and for good reason. So those are all the accessories that I would recommend to really kind of amplify your experience with the Delta Emulator. As I mentioned, whether you're on the go or whether you want to have it kind of as a standalone console at your house, it's very easy to use, it's very self-explanatory. The way that you kind of play these games in the retro style, but in 2024, is absolutely amazing. And I will link all of these accessories down in the description below. But outside of that, definitely enjoy this because who knows if this is going to last forever. As of right now, it doesn't seem like Nintendo's getting in the way of any of this, which is very surprising. And everybody seems to be kind of reliving their nostalgic moment. I'm already all the way through Pokemon Yellow in just about a week and a half's time, which is very cool to see. But now you have your 2 situations, which is your on-the-go retro game console and then also your at-home retro game console to kind of experience with all your friends or maybe your loved ones or your kids now that kind of bring them backwards to when you used to grow up and play these games. But that's going to do for this video, everybody. Let me know in the comment down below what would be your favorite accessory for the Delta Emulator. Is it a game controller? Is it maybe a MagSafe battery to make sure your battery doesn't run out? Or something in between? Maybe the Apple TV 4K kind of opening up this retro world to a 100-inch display is something that's an absolute game changer, which, take my word for it, it absolutely is. But that's going to do it, everybody. If you did make it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so you know you made it to the end, and leave a comment down below of your favorite retro game that you remember that you're now playing on your Delta Emulator. But that's going to do it. If you guys want to watch more videos like this one, or you want to learn more of the ins and outs of the Delta Emulator, click on one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando with 9to5Mac. Peace, everybody.